Privileged to be here. Just a word about me. I've been with Stadium about 18 months now or so. Before that, I was with Smiths Group, ran two divisions for the last 15 years in Smiths Group. Smiths Industries, as some of you may know that as. So my background's FTSE 100 and going to the other end of the spectrum now with small cap and micro cap business with Stadium. And we've got a very interesting story to tell here. So it's a story of transition about a company that's been around more than 100 years. And I'll take you through the history, the strategy and what we're trying to achieve. We don't build ships. This is the new Sunseeker electronic interface that we have designed and built for Sunseeker. So I just had to point out that we certainly don't do boats and ships at this stage. Basically, this business was a contract manufacturing business. It was a business that was doing nothing but electronic manufacturing services called EMS. There's about 250 of those companies in the UK. The largest one that you'll probably recognise that's a UK-based business is TT Group. They've got about an £80 million EMS business within TT Group. And it's just to give you a sense of that market space, you've got the massive companies like Flextronics at $40 billion of sales, losing about 5% a year, make all your Apple iPhones for you. So on a contract manufacturing base in China. In the UK, we've got about 250 local EMS businesses, of which Stadium's in that sort of upper group that have been doing contract manufacturing services for a number of years. And that's a very tough market. You're not in control of your destiny. You are subcontracting out excess capacity from sort of medium-sized and large-sized OEMs. In fact, at Smiths, we used to use companies like Stadium when the factories were full. You'd outsource the rest of the electronic manufacturing. So the journey we're talking about is actually moving the business up the value chain, actually doing more IP, more design work, and creating more value and better and sustainable margins going forwards. The business has 4 sites in the UK, one in Hartlepool, one in Rugby, one over in Norfolk, and one down in Southampton, which is its latest acquisition now. And we have a large site sitting in Dongguan in southern China, right in the heart of the electronic manufacturing centre of the world. Gives you sort of scope of the size of it. So what do we actually do now? And then I'll take you onto the journey so you can see where we've come from. Basically, the central EMS business, the central contracting manufacturing services business is there. We've added to it what we're doing comprehensively in the design of specialist power supplies, particularly in high efficiency power supplies that are required in things like medical devices, the new generation of instrumentation, a lot of it to comply with new EU directives that are coming out about increasing efficiency of power supplies in electronic equipment. And we've also added to it an interface and displays business, which is the acquisition we've just made in Stadium, which is the front end, all the control inputs, and particularly on the professional side. I'll take you through some of the applications that we've developed there. The idea being we can go to our customers and we can say, not only can we manufacture your systems, we can design and help you with the integration and the complete subsystem for your application. We've been very successful recently with Siemens. We're involved in the high-speed train program on the control systems for communication areas. We're very successful with Northrop Grumman. Now we provide all the marine bridge controls for the new Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carrier. So that's coming from Stadium. Whereas before we were simply just doing contract manufacturing, and we've been able to achieve that in the last 12 months. It's an old company. I remember Stadium crash helmets years ago when I was a lad. This is a plastic injection moulding business from 100 years ago. It's the first pioneer of metal to plastic in the UK, up in the north. Grew to quite a large size of company, over 150 million, before basically that whole business offshored. You ended up with all of that technology being a commodity business. You could no longer make plastic injection moulding in volume. If it was a commodity type product in the UK, most of that went offshore. And so the company went through a large transition. It got to a point of way over 150 million, but with lots of debt, losing money, and then had to be restructured. This was about 12 years ago. And had started contracting with Black & Decker. So it was starting to do all the manufacturing of the plastics and then the electronics that went into Black & Decker power tools. And when it started doing electronics, it started its little electronics activity and grew from that position. So basically, the brave decision was taken at that stage to sell all of the plastic assets that the business had and concentrating on growing its electronics business. And that's how we've started with where we are now. The latest thing we've done is to acquire a new business, which I'm going to take you through, which we did in September of last year. But I do remember the old Stadium logo and crash helmets, but we don't do those anymore, unfortunately. So the size of the business is about 41 million. This year's guidance is about 42, 43, if you look at where we are. Profit before tax of 1.7. The guidance, if you look at it, is around 2.5 for this year in terms of profit before tax number. Cash conversion is good. We've got 4 million of cash in the bank. We pay dividends. We're yielding about 4% and a bit. If you look at the results of the business, we have a 3 times cover dividend policy. And the only downside, which we don't have on here, from it being a 100-year-old business, is there is a small pension legacy. So one thing we do have to manage through is a pension deficit of about £5 million in the business. We have a scheme. It's basically, we've got about 800 pensioners that mostly come from the plastics business of years and years ago. 400 of those are active, and they were sold off to the LNG and pensions with an insurance policy of about 13 million, leaving us with 400 deferred pensioners, a scheme value of about 35 million, and a deficit that's been calculated at about 5. The company's paid, on that deficit's about 5 for the last 7 years. The company's paid £1 million a year into that, so it's still 5. So I like the way the pension mathematics work. We're just about to go through a revaluation. Our estimates are that's going to come down significantly when that happens, and we've already reduced our payments into the pension scheme from £1 million to about 800,000 this year, and I expect to see that reduce further. So although there is a pension liability associated with the business, I think it's manageable. I think it's fundable from where we are in terms of paying dividends, earnings, and creating the opportunity for acquisitions going forward, which we'll talk about. Basically, which markets do we operate in? The main market for the traditional EMS business has been the industrial electronics market. This is motor drive controllers, those sorts of things, security products. We are now moving the business much more into transport infrastructure. I mentioned Siemens and high-speed trains, that's become a large part of the business. Aerospace, we produce now the displays that go onto the new Airbuses for do not use your mobile phone and the toilets engaged. Now they've turned to LED technology, apart as they used to use incandescent lights behind small displays. So we're involved in that program. Marine, I mentioned, with the ship and bridge control business. We're involved in the LED lighting market. We provide the drivers for the professional end of LED lighting. So this is things like operating theatres, TV studios, that sort of thing. Security and defence, which has been largely my background, largely is in security and largely is involved in building security type work with electronics for smart buildings. So we're involved in doing that. Medical, we provide power supplies for monitoring systems, as well as doing a lot of the electronic building for some of the drug dispensing type applications that are out there. And emerging technologies, particularly for us, we're very good at smart metering for water and electricity. Our largest customer has been Landis and Gear for the last few years. We're just about to enter a brand new market for prepayment meters, which is largely centred on the African continent. We've got some very good contracts coming through on that basis. And I think as we go forward, a large proportion of the business will be focused on some of the applications there. We have some unique technologies that fit that very, very well, so we're quite pleased with that. So our strategy is being about more than just an EMS business. Being an engineer myself, when I look at the contract manufacturing industry in the UK, it's characterised by far the majority of these people are production engineering people. They don't like design, they keep well away from designing products, and they stick to trying to make machines more efficient. So we've got a whole group of those sorts of people in Stadium, but we're adding to that this idea that we can design more and more parts of your subsystem as an OEM. People like that. So what happened is a few years ago, people outsourced everything. So you'll find that an equipment manufacturer moved out his power supply design to lots of small power supply companies. XP Power took advantage of that. If you look at XP Power, a great company on AIM, and what they did was bought up lots of these small power supply businesses that are out there. The same happened with displays, with RF modules and everything else. And of course outsourcing of the actual manufacturing itself. You ended up with, if you're a Northrop Grumman or a Siemens, lots and lots and lots of small vendors out there, lots of subcontractors that are supplying to you. And now they like the idea of having less subcontractors. And so if you can do more as a subcontractor, then you get a bigger slice of the contracts coming through. And the margins involved in those are much higher than just doing subcontract work. Typically, on the EMS side, your gross margin is around 15%. And if you're designing and putting IP into the subsystem, your gross margin average is something like 35%. So as a big difference in the performance of the business going forward. And we're starting to see that this year. As we move more and more into the IP area, this year we'll see more than half the profits of the company coming from IP-related businesses rather than from the traditional EMS business. So that's the reason for doing it. And basically the other part of the story here is about acquisition. So coming from a big FTSE 100, a large part of the story there is about acquisition. We've got a very rigorous acquisition profile. We ended up buying one last September, which is our displays business. Bought that business on a 6x multiple. We'll come to that in a minute. We funded the business through debt, so we've been able to take on a good facility from HSBC, which we negotiated last year. And our deal with our shareholders has been about sustaining the dividend where it is at 3x cover, taking on a bit of debt and buying 2 of these small acquisitions, proving that enhances the performance of the business going forwards, and then perhaps in another year's time going back to the market for fundraising and doing something a little bit bigger. So that's been the sort of trajectory that we're on as a business. The sales strategy is an interesting one. So we're taking a contract manufacturing business, and now we're going from talking to purchasing people about excess capacity to talking to design people about designing the products for them and then selling the complete system. So we've been through quite a transition in the route to market of the business. It has meant changing quite a few people around and bringing on people with different skill sets, but we're a long way through that now. So it's what we call cross-selling initiatives, being able to sell the complete package of IP as well as manufacturing services, which is important. And obviously focusing on growth markets. As a contract manufacturer, you're not too choosy about which markets you focus on. You try and take manufacturing from wherever you can get it. Where we are now, those top 3 markets, if you think about aerospace, transport, and what we're doing in the marine area, they become the growth markets and a high focus for the business going forwards. We have, I believe strategically, a really good model here. Our vision is to take this business to 100 million. And the way we're going to do that is by adding to where we are with power products and displays with a couple of other technologies. These are generic things that apply to most electronic systems that are out there. Most of them have some way of inputting into the system. Everything's got a power supply. Everything's got the electronic PCBAs in the centre that we manufacture in our factories. But just about everything's also got Wi-Fi connectivity in it. And there's a lot of very interesting small businesses out there at the moment doing design work for large companies on that basis. And just about everything's got sensors in it. Your iPhone, if you've got one in your pocket, it's got an accelerometer in it that you shake and it does something. There's lots of that kind of sensor technology built into professional equipment nowadays. And again, in the UK, there's a whole range of small businesses doing very well out of that niche. And if you could package them together, you can have a much stronger proposition for these large OEMs. So really that's what we're about doing. The first one we did on this journey was interface and displays business, capacitive displays, the sort of display technology that you've got on your iPhone, if we use that example, used for Cambridge County Council for bus ticketing systems that are used out there. We can design and manufacture the whole thing. High-speed rail communication interfaces, so here, design the front interface device as well as all of the electronics behind it and provide that as a complete sub-assembly. Northrop Grumman's an interesting one, so we've gone from just doing the display side of the business to supplying that complete unit, manufactured electronics, everything built into the box, tested and delivered to the ship side. A much more lucrative way of doing it than just doing the sub-assemblies at board level. And another example of the medical market of designing and shipping complete control panels that are used in operating theatres for the medical market. So, here we are, trying to catch up with your timing.
You're doing very well.
Is that okay? So what we've got here is a really interesting case study of moving a contract manufacturing business that really wasn't growing very well at all and trying to do something different with it, defining a very clear strategy going forwards about IP and about doing more of the sub-assembly for the sort of medium-sized OEMs out there, effectively, which is a niche that's not exploited at all at the moment. Improving the margins and returns, so taking a business which traditionally operated in the teens of gross margin to one that's operating at 35% of gross margin, and then seeing the returns come through as a result of that as we go forwards. Getting the financing from HSBC, we obtained a facility of about £11.5 million, of which 8 million of that is used for acquisitions. And we've used about 3 and a bit, 3.2 so far. So one acquisition's completed on the trail. And basically, after we've done a real proving of this over 12 months and made sure that everyone understands the performance of the business is improving, then we'll be going back to do something bigger, because coming from Phipson 100, we've got lots of good ideas to take this business forward and how we're going to drive it to 100 million. So it's a combination of growth and maintaining probably around 30% of our share register, which is there for dividend investment on the end, and maintaining the interest there at a reasonable level whilst we embark on a steady growth story for the business. And that's Stadium Story.